She looked at me like I was an inconvenience, like I was something that it wandered into the wrong room. She had no idea what she had just done. They see the peacoat, the bare wrists, no security, no noise, and they make a decision about who you are. She made that decision the moment I walked through the door. What she didn't know was that the man I was about to marry had never once raised his voice in his life, and every single person who had ever crossed him wished he had. But let me take you back to that Tuesday, because you need to understand what walked into that boutique before you can understand what pulled up outside of it. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. I wasn't dressed to impress anyone. I wasn't there to make a statement. I just wanted to find something for him, something small, something he wouldn't expect, because men like him are difficult to shop for when they already own everything that matters. I walked in alone. No one with me, no one ahead of me, just me, a gray coat, and an idea. I wasn't nervous. I had no reason to be. She saw me within seconds. I felt it before I saw it. That particular kind of attention that isn't curiosity, it's calculation. I could see her name on the small pin at her lapel, Vivian. She walked over slowly. The smile was in place, the kind of smile that has been practiced until it looks like warmth. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask what I was looking for. She said, and I want you to hear exactly how she said it. This isn't that kind of store. Everything here starts at 4 figures, just so you're aware. Smile still on, hands folded, like she was doing me a kindness. I looked at her, and I thought about something Jaiwan told me the first night I ever sat across from him at a table where I didn't understand half of what was happening. He said, "The people who need to announce power don't have it." So I smiled back at her. I didn't correct her. I didn't reach for my phone to show her anything. I didn't explain who I was going home to, or what that meant, or what it had meant for the last 14 months. I just smiled, and I kept walking. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known standing in that store, was that someone had already been told where I was, and he was already moving. People see a woman alone in a gray coat, and they make a decision. They see no ring, no bodyguard, no performance of wealth, and they decide she doesn't belong in rooms that cost money to enter. What they never think to ask is why she's so calm. Not unbothered in the way people perform online, actually calm. The kind that comes from standing next to something so much larger than yourself that very little registers as threat. I didn't grow up with money. I want to be clear about that. I grew up understanding what it meant to count things, to wait, to make do. I know what it is to stand in front of something you want and feel the distance between you and it as a thing with actual weight. To look at a price tag, not to decide, but to confirm what you already knew. To smile at the person behind the counter before they decide whether you're worth speaking to. I had spent a long time learning how to make myself small enough to be acceptable in certain rooms. And then I met him, and smallness stopped being a language I needed. So when I tell you that my life changed, I don't mean it the way people say it when they get a promotion or move to a bigger apartment. I mean the floor shifted underneath me, and an entirely different world came up to meet my feet. I met him at a function I wasn't supposed to be at. A colleague had an extra invitation. I almost didn't go. I was tired. I had nothing to prove to anyone in that room. He was standing near the far wall, not at the center of it. That's the first thing I noticed. Men who need to be seen stand where the light finds them. He stood where he could see everything. I don't know how long he had been watching before I felt it, but when I looked up, he didn't look away. Men like him don't look away. They don't apologize for looking. They decide. And something about the way he looked at me told me he had already decided before I had finished crossing the room. I didn't know who he was that night, not his full name, not what he did, not what it meant that 3 men had repositioned themselves in the room the moment he started walking toward me. I only knew that when he spoke, everything around us went quiet, not because he was loud, but because the room understood that this was not a moment to interrupt. I learned his name 20 minutes later. I learned everything else over the 14 months that followed. And some of it I'm still learning to hold. There are things I have sat with at 3 in the morning that I have not told anyone, not because I couldn't find the words, but because saying them out loud would make them a weight I'd have to carry differently, and I'm not ready for that yet. He asked me to marry me on a Thursday evening. I know it was a Thursday because I remember thinking the week wasn't even over and my entire life had already rearranged itself. The room was still. Outside the door, and I counted because I count things, it's what I do, there were 6 men standing guard. Not hotel security, not event staff. His. He got down on one knee and he looked at me the way he always looks at me, like I'm the only variable in any room that he hasn't already accounted for. I said yes before he finished the sentence. So when that woman looked at me in the boutique like I was a problem she needed to remove, she had no idea what she had just walked into the path of. She had no idea that 2 miles away, a phone had already buzzed once, and that the man who felt it was already reaching for his jacket. She followed me to the next rack. I felt her 2 steps behind me the way you feel weather before it arrives. She wasn't subtle about it. She wasn't trying to be. This was her store, her territory, and I was a problem she hadn't resolved yet. I kept moving. I touched a sleeve, checked a price tag, not because I needed to, but because I wanted her to watch me do it without flinching. She went to get the manager. I saw it happen. The quiet word, the glance in my direction, the nod. The manager walked over the way people do when they've been trained to remove you without creating a scene. Measured, professional, polite in the way that isn't polite at all. I want you to understand something about who I had become in the 14 months since I met him. I had sat in rooms where the air itself felt like a negotiation. I had stood next to him while men who ran things, actual things, not titles, not the kind of power that needs an introduction, but things that moved money and people and outcomes, chose their words carefully because he was present. I had learned what real tension feels like. And this, a boutique manager in a pressed blazer walking toward me with a practiced smile, this was not tension. This was nothing. I don't wear the ring in public, not because I'm ashamed of it, not because I'm hiding, because there are things in his world that I have learned to be careful with. Information is one of them, and a ring like that, on a hand like mine, tells people things that he prefers they find out on his terms, not theirs. Jaewon told me something once, early on, when I was still learning the edges of what his life meant. We were in the car, late, the city moving past the windows like something underwater. He said, "You don't go anywhere alone anymore, not because you can't, because I won't allow anyone the opportunity to disrespect what is mine." I remember the way he said it, not loud, not heated, like a fact, like gravity, like something that had already been decided long before he said it out loud. I didn't argue. I understood, even then, that this wasn't possession the way small men mean it. This was something older than that, something that didn't have a clean name in the language I'd grown up speaking. My phone vibrated. Once. I held up one finger, not to the manager exactly, just into the air between us, and I looked down. One message, 2 words. On my way. I had not called him. I had not texted him. I had not told anyone where I was going when I left the apartment that morning. I had not needed to, because he knows. He always knows. What I can tell you is that in the 14 months I have known him, not one thing has happened to me that he did not find out about. Not one room I walked into that he didn't already have a map of. Not one person who looked at me wrong that didn't, at some point afterward, have reason to remember that they had. I put my phone back in my pocket. The manager was still talking. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since he'd walked over, and I said very quietly, "You may want to wait." He didn't understand what I meant. He would. I looked at the door, and I waited. I heard it before I saw it. Not noise, the absence of it. The street outside, which had been doing what streets do, moving, humming, living, went quiet. Not silent the way empty places are silent. Quiet the way things go quiet when something has entered the space that everything else instinctively recognizes as above it. A line of black SUVs. No sirens, no urgency, no performance. They stopped at the curb the way expensive things move, without apology, without explanation, simply arriving as if the street had always been theirs and they had merely chosen this moment to use it. The doors opened in sequence, not rushed. 6 men stepped out. They didn't look around. Men who work for him don't look around. They already know where the edges are. They found those edges long before the car stopped. And then, the last door opened. I have never once seen him move like a man who is trying to get somewhere. He moves like a man who understands that wherever he is going will still be there because nothing leaves before he arrives. He came through the door of that boutique, and the room changed. I don't know how else to say it. The temperature didn't drop, the lights didn't dim, nothing you could point to and name, but every person in that store felt something recalibrate inside them. The woman at the register, the manager who was still mid-sentence when it happened. Vivian. I watched Vivian's face the half second before she understood, and her face did something I don't have a word for. He didn't look at any of them. He looked at me. He crossed the floor like they weren't there, like the racks and the cases and the staff were furniture he had accounted for and dismissed. He stopped in front of me, looked at my face the way he always looks at my face first, reading before he does anything else. He took my hand. He is not a gentle man by nature. I want to be honest with you about that. There is something in him that the rest of the world has learned to read as a warning. I have watched people who are themselves not soft, recalibrate the moment he walks into a room. A stillness comes over them, a reassessment. He has never explained himself to anyone. He has never needed to. There are things that make a person this way. I have never asked what his were. And yet, when it is just the two of us, when the door is closed and the men outside are outside, and it is only him and me, and the quiet, he becomes someone else entirely. Not weak, never weak, but careful, the way you are careful with things you cannot afford to lose. He once held my face in both hands and looked at me like I was the most dangerous thing he had ever chosen to be close to. I don't think he meant it as a compliment. I think he meant it as the truth. Not dramatically, not for the room. He just took my hand the way he always takes my hand when he has decided that whatever was happening before he arrived is over now. Then he turned, slowly. He looked at Vivian, just once, the way you look at something you have already made a decision about. He said, and I want you to understand that his voice did not change, did not harden, did not rise by a single degree. He said, "She'll take everything in this case, and you'll thank her for choosing your store." That was all. No threat attached, no explanation offered, no pause that invited a response. He had simply stated what was going to happen in the same tone a person uses to describe what already has. Vivian nodded. She didn't speak. I'm not sure she could. The manager was already moving, already lifting things from the case, already reaching for tissue paper, already becoming someone who very much wanted this transaction to go smoothly. I didn't know, standing there, what I found out 3 days later. I didn't know that the boutique's parent company, the group that owned not just that store, but 11 others across the city, had 3 of his partners sitting on its board, had had them there for 6 years. I didn't know that he had known the owner personally for 11 years, that they had dinner twice a year, that the owner sent a gift when our engagement was announced. I didn't know that the building the boutique occupied, the lease, the location, the address that made it what it was, existed in part because of a deal that had his name somewhere inside it. Not on the surface, not where you'd find it easily, but there, the way his name tends to be in things, quietly, completely, everywhere. Vivian had looked at me like I was a woman who didn't belong in a room she controlled. She had no idea that the room itself belonged to him. In the car, I asked him how he knew. He didn't answer right away. He does that. He takes the space he needs and he doesn't apologize for it. And after 14 months, I have stopped expecting him to. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and he held out the ring. Not a new ring, my ring, the one I had been carrying in my bag since the morning of the engagement, the one I slipped off my finger every time I left the apartment alone because of what he told me, because of what it means, because information in his world is a currency you don't spend carelessly. I had thought it was in my bag. He had it. I don't know when, I'm not sure I was meant to. He took my left hand, slowly, the way he does everything, and he put it on my finger, and he looked at me. And that was his answer. Outside, the city moved past the windows like it always had, like nothing had changed at all. I didn't put it back in my bag. That evening, around 7, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. It was Vivian. She had gotten the number somehow. She didn't apologize. I want to be precise about that, because it matters. She did not call to say she was sorry. She called to ask if I could put in a word for her. Her store had lost 2 major accounts over the days that followed, both of them gone within hours of each other. No explanation given, no warning, just gone. She thought perhaps I had a connection, perhaps I could make a call, perhaps if I spoke to someone. I listened to her until she finished, and then I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know anything about that." And I ended the call. I never asked him. He protects me from certain weights the way you move sharp things out of reach of someone you love. I have thought about that moment many times since, about what it means to watch a room full of people reorganize themselves around a single presence. Not because he asked them to, not because he threatened them, but because something in them, something old and accurate, understood that the correct response to him was compliance. Mercy, someone once told me, is the luxury of people who can afford to offer it. Some rooms simply cannot afford it. The boutique was not the whole story. There were other rooms before that one, other people who made decisions about me before they understood what I was adjacent to, and something happened in each of those rooms, after. I only found out about some of them. He has never confirmed the rest, and I have never pushed, because some questions, once answered, change the shape of everything around them. I have decided that I would rather live inside what we are than spend my time mapping its edges.